Hey guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today I am showing off my US book haul. So at the end of October, Scottish husband and I went to Baltimore for a wedding, and we traveled a little bit in the east coast of the US, and of course, I had to hit every single bookshop along the way. So I think I was very restrained. I only picked up 12 books, 2 of which I have read now. I'm just so proud of myself. And yeah, I wanted to show off what I got because this is a particularly good stack of books, if I do say so myself. So the first book that I wanted to talk about is one that I've already read. I talked about it in my first little tea break video. This is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. I really love her horror books, and I picked this up, read it on the plane, really loved it. This is a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe, which is one that I either have read a really long time ago or just never bothered to pick up. We'll find out soon enough because I am planning on rereading it on the back end of this. But basically we follow a soldier who has returned to their childhood friend's home and realizes that she is incredibly ill. Something is going wrong in this house as well. It's super eerie, it's creepy, there's some good body horror stuff in here, and I just thought this was fabulous. I really love this. This just came out in the UK, I realize, but I really like the American cover, so I ended up picking this up in hardback. What can I say? I'm a cover magpie. Another book that I talked about in my tea break was The Dissolving Classroom by Junji Ito. I picked this up and I have read this now. It was fine. And I also picked up Black Paradox by him as well. These are 2 books that I just never really saw in my local bookstores, so I ended up picking them up. I have no idea if this completes my Junji Ito collection or not. I'll find out soon enough. If you don't know who he is, he's basically a horror manga artist. He's someone who I really enjoy. He does really good horrible body horror art, and I really enjoy his storylines as well. I have read through I think the vast majority of his stuff that's published in English, and yeah, I'm just kind of collecting all of his books, so I'm really glad that I found these in Boston. Moving on to some more books that I'm really glad I found copies of because for a long time they just weren't available in the UK. The first one is Hell Followed With Us, and this is by Andrew Joseph White. The same time I picked this up, I also found a copy of The Gathering Dark, which is edited by Tori Bovalino, whose book, Not Good for Maidens, I just read last month. This is a sort of anthology of folk horror, and this is a kind of really apparently quite messed up YA horror book filled with all kinds of good body horror and all of that good stuff. So these are 2 books that I have just been unable to find in the UK. They weren't really available online, and when I saw Angela from Literature Science Alliance, she directed me to her local bookstore and we went shopping, and I picked both of these up. They look so good. They kind of have a strong family resemblance here. They look like they're related in some way, but no, I think that these are both very much independent of each other. So as I said, this is basically an anthology of folk horror. It looks really interesting. It's got some very familiar authors like Chloe Gong, Erica Waters, Hannah Witten. So this should be really interesting. I'm finding I'm getting more and more into short story collections. And then Hell Follows With Us is about a boy named Benji who has escaped this fundamentalist cult that he was raised in. And this cult has brought about the apocalypse, the actual end times that cults always seem to be trying to foretell. So he has some kind of bio weapon implanted in him that he's trying to sort of keep away from these people. He's desperately trying to hide from them, and he ends up being taken in by a group of LGBTQ kids. This is supposed to be amazing. This is supposed to be fabulous. I'm really excited to read this. It's meant to be really messed up though. We got some more horror. This one is Slewfoot by Brahm. I believe just of the singular name Brahm. And this is, I think, Salem Witch Trials era horror, kind of like ancient spirits in the woods, colonists, and a battle between pagan and Puritan. I don't know a huge amount about this, but I have seen it pop up quite a lot. It's not necessarily a period of time that I'm particularly interested in, but it's one of those that, I've been influenced. I've officially been influenced, and I was very curious when I saw it in Baltimore. And it also has I don't know if you can see this with the ring light, but it also has these amazing illustrations that I think the author did themselves. So don't know a huge amount about this one. I'm kind of keeping it that way, but I've heard very mixed things. People either absolutely love this book and are obsessed with it, or it didn't quite work for them. So we'll see where I fall. Even more horror. The Johns Hopkins University Barnes & Noble had this absolutely incredible horror table, and that's where a lot of these books are coming from. It was just, I literally like turned and looked at it and just started picking stuff up. Like within seconds, Scottish Husband turned around and was just like, how is that physically possible? How do you have that many books? But they had a really good selection. So the next one that I have is The Ghost Eaters by Clay McLeod Chapman. This is a contemporary set horror book in which we follow Erin, and her sort of ex-boyfriend Silas from university passes away, and she ends up being kind of tempted into this new drug called Ghost, which allows you to see the dead. She has a seance, and apparently this particular drug has some really terrible side effects. Once you take it, you can kind of never go back. I sort of fell in love with this cover. I absolutely love this cover, and I was very, very curious. So yeah, we're gonna see how this one goes, but I've got some good feelings about this one. And then the last of the horror books, also from Johns Hopkins University Barnes & Noble, is The Hacienda by Isabel Canyas. I've started this one. I'm only a few chapters in, as you can see, but think Mexican Gothic meets Rebecca, especially if you read Rebecca and were really hoping that Mrs. De Winter would have a little bit more of a spine. That seems like what you're getting in this book. This book is set in the aftermath of the Mexican War for Independence, and we follow Beatriz, whose father was sort of captured and executed as a traitor during the overthrowing of the Mexican government. And so she ends up being proposed to by a wealthy man. She accepts in order to change her life circumstances. She goes to his massive hacienda, his giant house in the countryside, and she thinks she's beginning her wonderful new life, but it's obvious that something sinister is going on. This sounds really, really good. I'm so excited to read this. This is going to be my next book, I think, once I finish my current book of short stories that I'm working on. As I said, started this, I think I was reading it in the taxi from the airport coming home, and like I struggle to read in cars, and I still managed to read the first 3 chapters of this, so it's quite engaging. I'm really looking forward to this. Next up, I have Siren Queen by Naivo. This is one that I've really wanted to get my hands on for a really long time. I spotted it on the shelf and I just grabbed it. I love all things old Hollywood, and I also really love Naivo's methods of sort of retelling history and infusing magic into familiar stories. So I read The Chosen and the Beautiful by her, which is her Great Gatsby retelling, which I really, really enjoyed. So I have very high hopes for this. I think this is going to be great. In this book, we follow Lily Wei, who is a young woman aspiring to be an actress in Hollywood, but she is refusing a lot of the roles that are generally delegated to Asian American women, like, you know, maids, for example. She decides that in order to get her success, she's willing to become a monster. And in Vo's version of the studio system, the system runs on blood vows and ancient magic, which honestly, knowing anything about the studio system, sounds about right, and she is willing to pay any price for her fame. It sounds great. I'm really looking forward to this. I think it's going to be absolutely fabulous, and I love this author's work. Next up is Genesis of Memory by Neon Yang. I have never read any of their books, but I do have the bind-up of the Tensor series on my shelf waiting to be read. I've heard great things about this particular book, and I haven't been reading a lot of sci-fi lately, and this sounds like it could be a good way to get back into the genre. This is basically a sci-fi retelling of Joan of Arc. What's not to love, honestly? I have heard really good things about this one. I don't necessarily know if it's going to be my cup of tea because I've never read any of their books before, but I am very much looking forward to diving in and finding out. And I've been seeing this book quite a lot, especially on Angela's channel, so I decided to pick up The Spear Cuts Through Water by Simon Jimenez. And this is an epic fantasy book. I've not been reading a ton of that lately. I've really gone in for horror, but this sounds brilliant. This sounds like my exact cup of tea. So in this book, we follow 2 warriors who are shepherding an ancient god across a broken land to end the tyrannical reign of a royal family. That's like everything that I love in fantasy. So I'm all on board. And look at the end papers and this map. Oh my god. It says that it's for fans of Black Sun and the Broken Earth trilogy. I am a fan of both of those things. I think that this is going to be brilliant. And last but not least is a book that may not usually sit within my wheelhouse, but I was talking to one of the booksellers at the wonderful Charm City Books in Baltimore, and this just sounded really, really good. She sold me on it. This is Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. I read White Smoke by her, I think it was last year, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I was telling this particular bookseller that I want to read more of her books. I have The Weight of Blood, I believe that's her new one, sitting on my nightstand right now, and she actually recommended this one as well, because even though it is a contemporary set YA book, which I was saying is not usually my thing, it also has a lot of thriller vibes to it, and she says that it's really good. It's one of her favorite books. So this is one of those where there's just not really anything on the back at all. So I'm kind of going in knowing literally nothing about this, but honestly, you know me, you know that I love to do that. So I'm really looking forward to this and picking up one of her other books, because White Smoke was just, it was amazing. All right, so those are the books that I picked up while I was in the US. I am officially on a bit of a book buying ban until after Christmas, because we tend to give each other a lot of books at Christmas time in my family. So my mother has put her foot down and says we're not allowed to buy any more books so that we don't accidentally duplicate anything at Christmas time. So this is going to be the last of my book buying for quite a while, I think. In the comments below, I would love to hear if you have read any of these books, what you thought of them, maybe if they're in your TBR, or anything that you recently picked up. I post bookish content to this channel fairly frequently, so go ahead and hit subscribe, check back soon, and I will see you next time.